What's going on, everybody? I'm your boy Retro Bliss, and you are on the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. Welcome to all of you viewers and all of you who are watching over at Mike's Gaming Gala. The show is being simulcast over there tonight as well. We have a very, very special show tonight. We're going to be talking a lot about some of my favorite things that happened during childhood as far as retro gaming is concerned. And I'm not going to even talk anymore about that. I'm just going to bring in the panel, and then we're going to bring in our guests first, Mike and Brian, as always. But these guys here, if I can scroll, we haven't had this many guests on one show. So
here, I'll bring them on for you.
All right, there you go. Thank you.
So we got
it's Dan Kitchen, Garry Kitchen.
Garry.
And David Crane. You guys, most of you probably do know who these guys are, but we're gonna let them tell us a little bit about themselves. But I'm gonna kind of go a little bit over who they are. First of all, they each are programmers, and they have credits, and they have a lot of credits, not just for the Atari 2600, because that's my first love, but they have programmed for other platforms as well. And I'm not even going to try to go over all of them. I know from what I saw online that Dan was involved with a minimum over 100 projects. So very, very impressive. But Dan wrote Commando, Atari Warriors, Crossbow, River Raid, Double Dragon, River Raid 2, I'm sorry, Ghostbusters, Crackpots, Tomcat, and more. That's not all of them. And then Garry, he did Donkey Kong. I played that one a lot, man. I played that one a lot. Keystone Capers, Pressure Cooker, Space
Pressure
Jockey.
Cooker was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
absolute favorite.
And I'm sure I'm missing some. And then David, he's I got some questions about him because he's a rebel. He may seem like he's quiet on the show tonight, but he is a rebel, and I'll tell you why. He left Atari. He's one of the founders of Activision. He's one of the guys that left there. And, I mean, that took a lot of guts. We're going to talk about that. I want to know what that was like. But anyway, he's written for a number of platforms, not besides the 2600. But he's done Pitfall, Dragster, Fishing Derby, Kaboom, Freeway, the Activision Decathlon. He worked when he was with Atari on Outlaw and Canyon Bomber, slot machines. He wrote Grand Prix. He was involved with Pitfall 2, Ghostbusters, Laser Blast. I mean, I don't have enough paper here. I want to know a little bit about. We're going to talk a little bit about the history, but we are going to get into a lot of the new stuff because they got a lot of new stuff going on right now. But I want to go over a little bit of the history, and I want to find out a little bit about what it was like when you made the decision to leave Atari to start your own company. And I think you had other founders for Activision as well. But what was that like? And after you tell me that, I want to know what it was like because Atari sued you guys, and you guys came out on top. And I want to know a little bit about that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. I joined Atari in 1977. Nolan Bushnell was still there, although he had sold the company to Warner. So he was kind of being slowly transitioned out of the company. And it was a lot of fun. He was a great guy to work with, had some great ideas. But with him working his way out and it becoming more of a corporate culture, it was less enjoyable to work at Atari. Simple as that, really. There are lots of strange things happened. I mean, the apocryphal story was when Atari circulated a memo, and it showed the top 20 games by sales from the previous year, and Larry Kaplan, Al Miller, and Bob Whitehead and I tended to just go to lunch together. We kind of hung around together. And we were reading that memo at lunch and said, wait a minute, you did this one, that one, and this one, and I did this one, and this one, and you did that one and that one. And the four of us were responsible for 60% of Atari's sales in the previous calendar year.
Wow.
And it was kind of open secret that Atari had done $100 million worth of cartridge sales the previous year. So the four of us were responsible for $60 million worth of sales, and we were making $20,000 a year salaries.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I'm sure they didn't share much of that.
No.
So.
No, and there were promises of sharing of revenues and bonus plans and such, and they all fell through. They all, in fact, they'd look us right in the eye and said, "We never promised anything. What are you talking about?" So, and when we went to the then CEO, Ray Kassar of the company, we said, look, it's pretty clear that we're good at this. What we do is worth a lot of money. So we just like to be compensated in some way, a royalty, a bonus plan, you name it. And one of the many things that he said was that, those were not games by David Crane or Al Miller. Those were Atari games. And it's Atari is the name on it, and Atari is the creator of them. And, you are not the important cog in the wheel. In fact, if the person on the assembly line didn't put them together, you wouldn't have sold any of those games.
Right.
It has that strong feel of early Disney. They were all Disney movies.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of experience with Disney after Walt Disney, But anyway, so that was kind of the last straw. In fact, one of the senior vice presidents who was in that meeting walked us out and he said, "It's been nice knowing you guys," because he obviously knew that was it. That would be the last time.
Mhm.
So yeah, we went and tried to decide how we were going to create a company. We thought about just becoming a consulting company and doing games back for Atari and just getting our money that way. And credit to Al Miller, he said, no, we're not going to do any of those things. We're going to compete with Atari. We're going to go out, we're going to raise money, and we're going to become a developer and publisher of software that play on the Atari 2600. Had to find a CEO to do that. We found Jim Levy, who was a record company executive. We had to find a venture capital company, and Jim had his hand in their pocket already on a project he was working on. So it all came together actually very quickly. And, so Activision was born. One of the hardest things to do was to name the company. We finally settled on Activision. And when you look back, you say, how could it ever have been anything else? But if you ever tried to name something, it's really very difficult. And we knew that Atari would try to sue us. So we contacted the most well-known intellectual property attorney in the Bay Area. His name was Aldo Test. And we met with him and he said, look, you leave with the shirts on your back. Don't take any technology. Don't take anything. And there's nothing they can do to you because your skill is in your head. And they don't know what's in your head. And it's also because it's a California company, they can't even force you to sign a non-disclosure or a non-compete or anything. So all that kind of happened very fast. It was about a 3-month process. And we opened our doors in October of 1979. Now we had to make games. So we managed to crank out 4 games in pretty much just 3-4 months. Because we were working almost 24 hours a day
And for yourselves now.
Working for ourselves. The hardest part, when Atari made the Atari 2600, they made it because they wanted to have a game console in your home that they could sell their arcade hits on. Remember, Atari was an arcade company. Mm-hmm. They had Pong to start with, the best known arcade game ever.
Computer Space.
But more than that, the Tank and, they had 15 or 20. Canyon Bomber, Depth Charge, and a whole bunch of these really nice arcade games. So they said, we're going to put out a home game, and our programmers in the back are going to create home versions of our arcade hits. And that was their plan. Well, when we started Activision, we didn't own any arcade hits. So every game we had to do had to be at least in some way original idea. We borrowed from some game concepts like, Freeway, borrowed from Al Alcorn's Space Race arcade game. And we were influenced by some of these games, but that was really the hardest thing.
Fight your son. Come on.
What's that? Bite your
I
tongue?
said, bite your tongue. You're being recorded, for God's sake.
We were inspired by those games.
Yes, inspired, right.
Nothing was a copy. So anyway, yeah, that's when Activision was formed. We did have to go through the lawsuit. I was the first person deposed. And by the time we mentioned that we had been coached by Aldo Test, they just started taking coffee breaks and not asking any more questions, pretty much. We were we followed the law. We did what we were supposed to do, and we went off to just use our own skills and our own brains. So that gets you right to the starting of it anyway.
So how'd these guys get involved with Activision? Because if they weren't founders, they came in after. How did that happen?
Well, when we started the company, we had 4 programmers, and we didn't use the term programmer because we were much more than that. We were game designers. Now that's all kind of split. You have people in those big teams that are programmers. Some are game designers, some are level designers, some are testers. We did all those things ourselves in one person. But Levy came to us and said, well, we've got to expand. We got to grow. How do we, build this company up? I said, well, we're going to need more guys. And that's where Garry came in. You can tell that story.
We were 3,000 miles away, Dan and I. We were in New Jersey. And that was actually the most appealing part of our group to Dave, because they didn't want anybody in their building messing with their chemistry. So when they heard there was a possibility to get another group of designers ready-made, because we had 4 or 5 people, and they would be so far away that we could never go in and mess with them, they said, hey, that sounds great. But what happened was Dan and I were working in an independent company doing engineering. And at that point in time, we were working in toys, electronic toys, which were very new. Mattel Football had just come out a couple of years before. And we we're very fortunate in that industry and got a couple of products marketed by Parker Brothers, which were big successes and won awards. So we kind of laid the groundwork. But all the press toward the end of that run started talking about this video game machine on the West Coast. And then I read about it and I saw that this little upstart company had spun off and was doing wonderful things, Activision. And
what did you think about Activision spinning off and doing that?
Oh, it was pretty cool, and we wanted to do it.
So I went to my
boss. And said, we should do Activision. Do what Activision did. We should do Atari cartridges. And he said, I run the company. You go back to your desk. I was making $11,000 at that point. It was, I wasn't making enough money to be smart enough to come up with an idea. So 3 months later, he called a meeting and announced to the company that he decided that we were going to work on the Atari machine. God, it was just complete brilliance. So I volunteered. It was my idea to reverse engineer it because I hadn't worked for Activision. I hadn't worked for Atari, had no access to documentation. So I bought it, spent 6 months ripping it open because I have an electrical engineering degree, figured out how it worked, wrote a manual, and then wrote Space Jockey, 2K game. Yeah. As soon as I finished Space Jockey, I left that company and went out on my own. Dan left with me, and we set up a little 4-person company in the basement of my house. And John Van Ryzen was among us, hero. John always tells the story of how awkward it was. His father was like this senior vice president of a big pharmaceutical company, very corporate guy. And he would go, wait, tell me again what you're doing? You get up in the morning, you drive to someone's house, and you work in their basement? He said, yeah, that's what I do. So
low overhead that way, right?
yeah, low ceiling too, because it wasn't watch the pipes. Yeah. So we ended up I ended up getting a contract with Coleco to do Donkey Kong. Now, if you think about it, at that point, there were very few people in the Western Hemisphere who they could have hired, because most of the people that knew how to do that were either at Atari or Activision. So, I was the best because I was the only one. So they hired me. I did it, and as that project was ending, I decided, all right, what are we going to do next? And Dan, at that point, and the other guys in the shop were working on Apple software, publishing Apple games. And I picked up the phone, called Activision's main number, asked for product development, got a guy on the phone who said he was the head of product development. I explained to him that we're in New Jersey, sitting in the basement writing Atari games. And he basically didn't believe me. He said, nobody does that. Did you work for Activision? Did you work for Atari? You can't be doing that. And I said, all right, I'll let Coleco know that when I'm done with Donkey Kong, I'll do another game for them. And he said, oh, wait, hold on a second. Don't be rash here. And he ended up coming out. We met. We went to California, met with the guys out there, and joined. And that was June of '82.
So I have a question about Donkey Kong, and I've heard you talk about this on another video somewhere. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I can't imagine what the question is, but go ahead.
I know. There are people who think that you did Donkey Kong a certain way because Coleco did not want, or Nintendo or whoever owned the rights to Donkey Kong did not want the port to be better or as good as the arcade game. And so, but that's not the case, is it? What happened?
Phil, those people are called flat earthers. Just remember.
It was really, the question was really, they didn't want it to be as good as the ColecoVision.
Yes.
Because they were selling a new machine. Now, the first question for anybody who has a brain is, how could you imagine that any game on the Atari 2600 could be better than a ColecoVision game when the ColecoVision had so much more capability? I mean, it was an impossibility.
Right.
The other thing you have to remember is they were going to make a lot of money off that cartridge. Donkey Kong was the biggest thing on the planet. Atari 2600 was the biggest platform on the planet. It probably had 90% of the installed base of players. So they never said any such thing to me. All they said is you have 90 days to do it. It's got to be done in time for Christmas. The game shipped in September, so I hit my date. And an analyst report came out in January after Christmas of 1982, and it said that out of 550 products they had on the market that year, including Cabbage Patch dolls, swimming pools, Little Tykes driving, and everything else, and ColecoVision, and all the ColecoVision cartridges, out of all those products, my little 4K ROM represented 25% of the total company's revenue.
That is
so
amazing.
There's no way they wanted a torpedo, something that was going to make that much money. So, I mean, the answer to
I think an argument could be made for the Intellivision version, because that version really sucks. Ooh. But I actually like the 2600 Donkey Kong.
I like the 2600 version too.
Well,
also, the simple fact is, I couldn't take more ROM. It was 4K. I couldn't go to 8K because there was no time. They weren't going to let it miss Christmas so that it had the, elevator level. But forget that.
Right.
They wanted it in the stores in September. They were going to sell every unit they manufactured, and they did.
I tell you what, when I was a kid, it didn't matter to me. I mean, there's a certain port that shall remain nameless for the 2600 that I loathe. I hate it. Don't tell Todd Fry, okay? But I played the heck out of Donkey Kong. No, I loved it, even though it just had the 2 levels on it. It was fun. I got a lot of enjoyment out of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me ask you this though, while we're on the Donkey Kong thing. So, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, like, if you were given 8K, you would have been able to do more with it. Like, was that kind of a limitation on their end too, though, because of cost, that they were just like, this needs to be on a 4K cart and get it done by Christmas? Or
no, it was just the timing of when they got the contract done. to get the rights. I mean, the second they had the rights, they started working on the game. And at that point, you couldn't even have a discussion of what about 8K, because I said, the Red Sea's going to part before I'm able to do this in 90 days. So I had no time to go make it twice the size. So never a discussion. It was the Greenberg brothers. The Greenberg brothers owned Coleco, two guys. And the last 3 days before the deadline, the person at Coleco I was working with called me and said, get on a plane, fly up to Hartford. They want you in the office. Ugh. I was in my comfy basement with my low pipes. So anyway, I got on a plane. I went up there and I sat in a cubicle, and the Greenberg brothers came and stood behind me for 72 hours. And I didn't sleep for 3 days. And when I was done, my wife at the time, my first wife, God bless her, she picked me up at flew up to the airport to meet me, spent a couple extra days up there. And she got off the plane, and I was standing there, and she looked at me and said, what is wrong with you? You look like you're dead. I was pale white. I had slept in 3 days. I think we went back to the hotel, and so much for big plans. I think I slept the entire week.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, you guys were all players, but you were not in the business at the time, and the business was very Christmas driven. If you could get a game out into the stores by the Thanksgiving and Black Fridays, those times, you could sell a ton of them for Christmas sales. If you came out in January, you'd sell about 12. It was unbelievable how far it dropped off. And
because if it wasn't in the Sears wish book, it wasn't happening.
Yeah,
right.
These ROMs were manufactured with a semiconductor process. There's a lot of other ways to do field programmable ROMs nowadays, but back then you actually had to go to a fab area overseas, and they made a mask of the pattern. They were called mask ROMs, and they took a minimum of 10 weeks to make. So you work back from Thanksgiving 10 weeks. If you don't have that game finished and debugged by that date, you miss Christmas. And so that's why they were sitting behind him, making sure that he made that date.
Yeah, and all the elevators in the world weren't going to make up the money of them missing Christmas. They could care less. Make it good, get it done.
Did they compensate you properly when they sold that many games? I want to know that.
No, of course not. Do you know any video game guys, except for the later years, that have been compensated properly? Dave and I and Dan always say that we're very akin to old-time baseball players. You see Orlando Cepeda or, these other guys, Sandy Koufax, and you see how great they are and how astounding they were. And they had $50,000 salaries. And then they're looking at some rookie coming up who signs a $30 million salary. And they go, geez, we played in the wrong era. So, I was compensated fine, but no, I did not buy a jet.
So you joined Activision. How did Daniel get in? I'm sure you had something to do with that. Oh, you both came together. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
I brought a design center with me. I basically said, all right, we have 4 or 5 people. I think it was 5 people. We're all going. We'll open an Eastern office. So we opened the Eastern Design Center, which is a design center Activision office in Glen Rock, New Jersey, directly next door to a Nabisco factory that made Oreo cookies. And that was insane. You would come out at 5 o'clock. One of the guys said the traffic was so bad on Route 208, right out of our building and right next to the Nabisco factory, because everybody was slowing down. They were rubber nosing. They were taking their noses and sticking them out the window, smelling the Oreo cookies. So we opened an office, and Dan came, and John Van Ryzen came, and some other guys came. So we It wasn't hire one person. It was hire the team.
But Dan earned his place in that meeting.
Of
And you
course.
came out and met with us.
Yes, explain that, Dan. Explain that famous
Well,
meeting.
I mean, keep in mind at that point we were enamored with the four designers, probably as much as you guys were. I mean, we were their fans. We were fanboys. So we went out to California. We saw Atari one week. Then we flew out to see Activision, and we were sitting in our cars waiting for the meeting to start. And we would see Dave or someone pull up, and Dave Crane came out and Bob Whitehead, and we were just starstruck. Oh my God, that's Bob Whitehead. You know, we were like watching a premiere of a Hollywood film.
The red carpet was out.
But we went into the meeting, and Al Miller had just finished ice hockey. And in the conference room, there was an Atari set up with a TV, and we met with the guys. And Al asked if we played games, and Garry said yes. And Dan plays ice hockey, and he plays quite well. And Al looked at me and slid over a joystick and said, "You want to try?" And so in the meeting, I sat and played Al Miller and beat him at his own game.
You know, head to head.
Because I had
great head-to-head games.
I could get behind the net and kind of flip the puck right in. And Al Miller didn't realize you could do that. So I think once I beat him at ice hockey, I think it kind of solidified our position, along with Garry's work on Donkey Kong.
And
Did you see this comment?
I can still hear the words the first time Dan scored a goal. And Al literally sat up in his chair and said, "What did you just do?"
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I've always pointed out that the day before a code releases, the game designer is the world record holder. You know, we all play our games to make sure that they're bug free. And one of us in the lab is always, you know, going to get the highest score. But a week after it goes out and there's a million kids playing it, they all figure out some different way to do it and, you know, score way above what we designers could do. Typical example is when I designed Pitfall, I designed it to run to the right. And if you did run to the right, it was a way to learn the game without having to read the manual. You would encounter the easier obstacles. You'd learn how to jump. You'd learn how to climb. You'd learn how to swing. And then you know, before you ever saw a tar pit or alligators. And you would always you'd have a vine over the alligators the first time you encountered them, but then you'd have to jump over their heads the next time.
Them darn alligators.
Yeah. And so I designed it that way on purpose. And then somebody just started running to the left. It's a circular world. You can do it either way. And if you die on the alligators, for example, when you get a new life, it comes down on the left side of the screen.
It comes down the other end. You don't have to go over them anymore.
Past the alligators.
Yep.
So it was by far the better way to play.
I always ran to the right. I was the idiot.
I did.
I streamed that game this week.
Right. I never thought about running to the left.
Yeah, I played this week and I hadn't played it that way, but I played it to go left. I think I got like 68,000 or something, but that's probably one of my better scores with Pitfall. But I'm like, subject, wow, you know.
On the subject of Pitfall, though, it's another thing that only the insiders really know about. When we were playing our games, or we were making our games, we made them as playable as possible. And if you're standing on an alligator head, you have to jump up and laterally at the same time.
Yes.
Right? So you get a diagonal jump. And I hated Mario that lets you, you know, mess with physics while you're
change mid jump. Yeah.
Yeah, change mid jump. Yeah. So I was a purist. It had to follow physics. But the joystick was being read 60 frames per second. So in order to make that jump, if I didn't do something about it, you would have had to go up and right in the same 60th of a second. Not up, then right. Not right, then up. But up and right in the same 60th of a second. So there's code in Pitfall that says for the first 3 frames after you jump up, you can then jump to the right. It will read the joystick.
Nice.
And you don't know that code is doing that. You have no idea what's going on. But the fact that you can actually jump diagonally, if I didn't do that, it would be impossible to jump diagonally. And it's just an example of the things that we put into our games. Everything looked better, everything played better, and nobody who played the games had any clue why. They just felt that Activision games were better.
They were. It wasn't a matter of feeling. They were. Yeah, there was no question about it. That's right.
Well, and I like you said, it's like extra little bit of polish, because there are certainly plenty of games that aren't Activision games that I love. I love Warlords. I love Space Invaders. But you play, so let's, using your guys, Pressure Cooker or Crackpots or Pitfall, and they're colorful. They are like, there's a polish to them that you don't get on the other Atari games.
Yeah, it's interesting. When we were writing,
it's back to similar that I said. We didn't have IP. We didn't own arcade games. So we had to create something that's totally original. And when you do that, you've got to make it as good or better than anything that's out there. And after a while, the good stuff that we were competing with was our own. And every time we came out with a new game, it had to be better than everything else we did.
Yeah,
right.
Because your other stuff was still selling.
So that's not a bad problem to have, though.
Nope.
I mean,
well, kids like me, I had to mow lawns and get my allowance and whatnot to buy a game here and there. I didn't have deep pockets when I was a kid, so I had to pick and choose. But like I said, I had an electronics store that I went to here in Cincinnati. I didn't have a Kmart or anything like that close by. So I would go in there and I'd be like, oh man, there's Dragster. That looks cool. I'm getting that. Right. So, I can remember making those decisions and then coming home and playing the games and my mom would yell at me, get your chores done. You didn't dust the furniture, and stuff like that. And because I was so busy playing video games. So yeah. Awesome.
We got a question from chat because I think we're kind of at the point where we might be moving on to Audacity and what these guys are doing now.
Absolutely.
But Brian's Man Cave asks, was Keystone Capers ever even a thought back in the day? Keystone Capers 2?
I had always envisioned wanting to do a train game and using the character that Garry had created in Keystone Capers because he was such a cool character. That was the initial thought of, hey, I'd like to do a game with a train, and he's a good character to put on there. That's really as far as it got.
Okay, so we will move on to that because for those who don't know, he's referring to what is now a released game from these guys. But
I have a green screen, but
why don't we start with so Audacity Games? That is the company that you guys now have creating new games for the Atari 2600. How did that, what led to that? Whose idea was that? How did you guys get together and work on this?
It was the community's idea, honestly. We started about 8 or 10 years ago, maybe even a little longer, going to retro shows. Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas was one of the early ones we went to. Then as they started springing up, we didn't find them. They found us. They would call us and go or write an email and say, hey, why don't you come out, do a panel, and maybe meet some people. And we would do it just for fun. And, they would usually offer to pay our way. We weren't charging anything to go. We don't charge for autographs, none of that stuff. So we would go, and year after year, gradually, homebrew games started coming out. Mm-hmm. So we would hear about these. We go to the show, people would talk about a homebrew game. And finally, the question started coming up, are you guys going to do a homebrew game? You guys should do a game. And we would leave the show and look at each other and go, no way. They were hard in 1982. We're going to go back to that? Oh, my God. My hands will be bleeding. But after hearing it for 5 or 6 years and hearing the passion of these people, please, come on, please. In 2018, Dave and I came back from a show. I don't think Dan was at that show. And we looked at each other. We said, we should really do it. We should try to do it. And we decided we were going to work on a game, the two of us, not tell
Whose basement
anyone.
did you pick?
The internet basement.
There we go.
So we decided to do it stealth mode. Didn't want to tell a soul. Didn't want any rumors. Didn't want any expectations. No deadlines. We worked on Circus Convoy for 3 years at night while we had full-time jobs. Somewhere early in that process, we told Dan. And Dan was interested in working on his game. So we joined forces, but we didn't announce Audacity until 3 years later in 2021. And when we announced it, we said this company, we didn't talk about games. Then there was great excitement, but you could tell people were saying, yeah, probably be 5 years before we see a game. And we did that on purpose because 2 weeks later, we said we're shipping and no one could believe it. And that started it with Circus Convoy is the first one.
Yeah, I mean, the homebrew interest is great. I mean, a lot of people say, I heard it's so hard to make an Atari 2600 game, I'm going to try it. And there are some tools out there. 8-Bit Workshop is an online tool. There's Stella, of course, has the debugging capability. And so people who were really wanted to be challenged decided they would do it. They weren't really at the beginning trying to make a commercial product.
Yeah.
You know, it was I'm going to do this, and that's where most of the homebrews came from. And I balked, you know, more than Garry did because I'm the engineer behind all this stuff, and I knew how much work it was going to be. I mean, you know, we talked about our early days in the 70s, and you're starting to talk about everything now in the 2020, 2018 timeframe. But we all worked in the video game business continually, all the way between those two times.
Yeah.
I've published games on 25 different consoles or systems, counting, you know, the cell phones before they were smartphones, just everything. And the commonality is if you want to put an image in a video game, you bring up Photoshop and you do an image. You can't do that on the Atari 2600. So part of that 3 years, I wrote a tool that allows us to manipulate the pixels on the Atari 2600 in certain ways. And Garry got crazy with that tool and made some of the coolest looking sprites that you'll see in Circus Convoy.
Yep. Cool.
And figured out how to do multiple color sprites that was never done before in the 80s and all that. And then we said, well, wait a minute, if we're going to do this right, we're going to need a plastic cartridge shell. At the time, Homebrew was taking old Atari games, steaming off the labels and using those.
Yeah.
So no, I put on my other engineering hat and I did a 3D model of a injection molded tool. Set it off, had it made. We now shoot cartridges. It's a company in Ohio, actually. Although I think they just sent it off to one of their facilities overseas, but you know, it fronts in Ohio. And so all the things we had to do graphics tools, we had to do sound tools, we had to do plastic. And then we're not going to do it unless we're going to do it in full color boxes with labels and manuals, and try to basically bring back the nostalgic feeling of Activision on Christmas morning in 1982. And we achieved that. In fact, we have the high score patches, just like Activision used to. And we basically created all those things because that was the only way we were going to get into this business. And that would be doing it right.
Well, the same hurdles that you had 45 years ago. We need to make shells. We need to make boards. We need to make boxes.
Except back then, the tools existed.
Well,
And we had to,
Yeah.
after we created one, but there were no tools existing 30 years later, 40 years later, it was all gone. So we had to recreate all those things that we had a company of 60 people to do. And the three of us were going to do it.
Yep.
And I kept being the eternal optimist. I kept trying to convince pretty much myself, not Dave, but myself, that we were 35, 40 years older with a lot more know-how now. This is going to be easier. And then,
And was it?
when reality hit, Dave and I would look at each other and go, there's no reason in the world why it's going to be easier. and it finally comes down to pushing around 6502 opcodes, and nobody made it any easier. It's still as hard as it was. But the thing we wanted to make sure was, if we're going to do this, the bar is going to have to be so high on what we deliver, or else we're just going to embarrass ourselves. If we put something else out and people go, it's not as good as the old stuff, it's not worth it. We had to be something where we could put something out and amaze people. And that's a pretty high bar, because we had been pushing that bar for years. And that's why Casey's Gold took so long, because the same thing. We had set a bar for Dan on Circus Convoy, and we wanted to make sure that Dan eclipsed that with Casey's Gold. And I think the audience response certainly shows that he did.
Response has been great. And it's funny that you mentioned that, and kind of like that nervousness of coming back. As a Canadian, obviously I'm a big hockey guy, and there are a lot of people who retire playing hockey, and they get invited to go play shinny with somebody, come play with us and all that. And I remember talking to one. He was a former goaltender in the NHL, and he was just like, I want to, but the first time a goal would go past me, I'd be like, what the hell are you doing, man?
Right.
And one thing because it's a good time to bring it up, and because that's why I shut my screen off the second, so I had to stand up and go grab it. So, like, when you talk about having, setting the bar there for the quality, I mean, without a doubt, like, for what the cost of your guys' stuff is, I mean, it is definitely high quality stuff. And as an example, obviously, we have, Casey's Gold, great game, because I got the collector edition, so I've been doing the digital, so I didn't open it up yet. But just to compare it to something else that arrived at my door today is Save Mary, from the XP line, which costs technically just as much if you didn't do the collector edition. But like, I look on the back of Save Mary, like, I mean, when you think about the design, like, what was actually the effort that was actually put into it, like, not much effort was put into this. And I mean, just all that open space. And like, when I feel the box quality itself, like, I could probably put my finger completely through this box right now if I press down, where like this actually has, some strength to it. And that's just where, again, kudos to you guys for actually taking the effort to make a top quality product for the price, because that's something that, I'm going to like this still, but it's still disappointing that, at the price point they asked for this, that this is the quality we got at the end of the day.
Not to mention, it takes forever, and half the time with Atari, the packages are damaged, or there's a problem about.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Casey's Gold came in less than 2 weeks. And
I know, we got it.
This took over a year. So.
Exactly, that's my point.
None of the games from Atari come with a pocket watch.
No.
Nope.
Very funny.
I mean, look, we take great pride in our customer service. Somebody has a problem, they reach out to us. We respond as instantly as we can. We fix the problem, we turn it around. I mean, this company is all about relationships with the community of people, because they're the ones who talked us into doing it. And, it sounds corny, and I'm sorry, I guess I'm a corny guy, but nothing's better than the guy who comes up to us at the show a couple of days ago in Sacramento and says, I just want to thank you for everything you've done, including making games again. Because when I was a kid, I was 12 years old, I opened up the cartridge, that Christmas Day playing with my sister or my family. Said, you can't relive moments like that. And he said, you guys brought them back. And that is what was so critical about Audacity. Someone texted me the other day and said, oh, you morons, you should just be delivering the games as binaries. So many more people would play them. But that's not what those people were asking for. They were
about the
asking
full
for
experience.
the experience, the beautiful box, the manual, beautiful cartridge, the patches. And that's what we deliver is the entire experience with the great game. And that makes all the difference.
We appreciate you pointing that out, that at every step we do take the high quality route. The thickness of the box, the shrink wrap. The shrink wrap is bulletproof. You know, we use the highest level shrink wrap there is.
Yeah, it doesn't implode the box.
Kevlar shrink wrap.
Yeah. And on the price point, I mean, in 1982, Pitfall's manufactured suggested retail price was $39.95. Adjusted for inflation,
money back then.
Adjusted for inflation, $39.85 is $107 or something like that today.
Right.
So, you know, we put out the standard at 60, and with all of that high quality in it, there's a lot of costs involved. And you're seeing them, you're getting them, and you're enjoying them, hopefully. Anyway, then we put some other technology in. This is the first time you can actually connect your Atari 2600 to the internet by QR code.
Yep.
You know,
yeah.
Put in the QR code technology so that when at the end of the game, you can scan a QR code and post your high score to our high score board.
Right. That's something that's not had been done that I know of on any 2600 game. And for those of you who don't know, when you first boot up all of the games, if you put your joystick to the right, you play. If you put to the left, you register. So you do that, you register, and then you get to post your high scores. I mean, what? This is a 2600 game. Are you serious?
And not only that, if your high score eclipses the plateau for that particular game, you're then notified in the process online that you've earned the ability to get a patch.
Oh, that's sweet. That is sweet.
So
that's really cool.
No,
yeah,
I completely agree with your guys' pricing. I mean, I like the fact that you have 3 different tiers. So for someone who really wants like everything, there's the higher tier package, you know, and then you got the collector edition for those that want the digital copy and the physical. And again, your base physical game is $60, and I've said this numerous times that, you know, obviously, you know, pricing, I don't have an issue with a $60 game. I mean, if the quality is there, like if it's a good game and the attention, the quality's there, I have no issue.
And that's the standard for homebrew is around $60 right now.
Right. I mean, so
like,
again,
you still have to manufacture a physical product.
Right. So, I mean, I don't think, I mean, if there's anyone upset with your guys' pricing, I mean, look, to Mike's
They're
point,
crazy.
they must not homebrew a lot. So, and again, when you look at what came out of the XP line here, like I said, $60 to $60. I mean, this is a much, much better presented packaged product by all means.
Absolutely.
Hey,
I love the digital because I
we
stream, so I can
appreciate-
play them.
We appreciate the people who are willing to pay those prices. Believe me, when we charge $99 or for the VIP $140, you know, I recognize it's a lot of money. And I'm honored that people are willing to put that much money out on the table, but it's unfortunately it's something we can't control because we can't wave our hands and suddenly have 1 million people buying Atari cartridges. That's the only way you'd be able to get the price down.
Right.
We're doing small quantities. Small quantities require a certain level of pricing, or else we just won't be able to do them. And so far, the audience has reacted well, and it works for us.
And separate from just the packaging, you know, the game Casey's Gold is in size and probably complexity 32 times what Crackpots was. So, and it's probably 32 times what other games are that you make. may purchase for that amount of money. So you're getting an incredibly deep experience that I worked on for 6 years. Garry and Dave worked on with me for 3 years. So some of the value in that is not just the actual packaging, but the depth of the game. It's certainly a longer experience you'll have with that.
I also think that the customer is paying for the passion and the labor of love that you guys have put into these games. I want to know, because we've talked about Casey's Gold, but we really haven't talked about all of them. I do want to talk about Casey's Gold some more, but tell us about the 3 games that are available, and then maybe we can talk about, if you guys are willing to, about what may be coming down the pike. I know one is. So let's start with the first one that came out, and that was Circus Convoy, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, as Garry said earlier, it was a collaboration, kind of divided. I was doing most of the programming, he was doing most of the art, and we're working together on the layout and gameplay. There are a lot of fun things in Circus Convoy. I mean, you've got an inventory of tools you can use. You never had that in an Atari 2600 game. You had that in some PC games back in the day, but you have complete inventory. The upper left-hand corner where you can see your object is actually a trick I do that makes it look like there's a transparent background on the sprite that's letting the background show through. Atari 2600 doesn't have transparency. It doesn't have an alpha channel. So there's just a lot of fun stuff that's in there. Like I said, some of the coolest art, the giraffe, simple little giraffe, but by using the tool that I created and Garry creating with it, you'll never see anything like that on the 2600. The clown is the same way. Those characters just generally could, and then of course there's the snake, which is basically a 50-foot long snake according to the character's height. That's one of, if not the biggest sprites ever displayed on the Atari 2600. So we put all the stuff in there and then tried to make the game really enjoyable. I think the maze that you have to go through is great. The way to figure out how to unlock certain things, get into them, play the mini games that are inside the truck trailers. Anyway, we like it.
A lot of people do, and it's like the quality is just amazing.
And we kept adding to it. We would get to the point where we had the hundreds of screens of the world and a couple of mini games, and we'd look at each other and go, we still have ROM left. We should do another mini game. Maybe we should do another mini game, because part of it was that paranoia of, we're going to make a statement. We have one shot to do this, and it better hit the mark. And I am so glad that we did that with Circus Convoy. And to a great extent, we did it as well with Casey's Gold, where we kept going to Dan and saying, a little more, let's try this, let's do that, let's keep plussing it up so that we don't, so we really amaze people when they get it.
Let's address Copper Mutant, I think it was, question a couple questions ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also got kind of ornery and said, we're not going to use any fancy hardware. We're basically going to have a ROM in a cartridge, just like we had in 1982. So technically, the game that you play from Audacity Games could have been done in 1982. Would have been expensive in 1982 because it uses a large ROM.
ROM size, yeah.
The irony is that you cannot buy a 4K or 8K ROM. I went out to my digital supplier and said, what's the smallest ROM I can buy? And it was 128 kbytes. So, and it was the same price as what a 4K byte ROM used to be back in those days. So that's the only concession to modern times, is the ROM is bigger. But there are people out there who put ARM chips in it, and that's just a different philosophy. I can't really complain about it because I was the first to do that with Pitfall 2. But with Pitfall 2, we loved the Atari 2600 so much that I went and created a chip that would expand the capabilities of the 2600. And it did not keep the 2600 alive for more than 6 more months. And Pitfall 2 became the only chip to use it, the only game to use the chip.
We have a very important question here. Do any of you guys feel bad about giving John Van Ryzen tennis elbow?
Well,
I'll tell you laugh, but it's an ongoing problem. It's affecting his ability to write another game for us.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
yeah. When I went back to playing and writing the game, as Gary had mentioned about the beginning of Audacity, a couple of years before that, I had started Gold Rush, which turned into Casey's Gold, and when I started to do that, I too developed a problem, at least in my thumb, and went to a physician and told me that I had repetitive play syndrome. So John, we met John at a recent show at Korg's. He came with us to do some promotional work for Alien Abduction. And yes, he told us that part of the problem with getting the game done was that he had injured himself by repetitively using the joystick over and over.
The question was, do we feel bad about it?
Yeah, I don't know if we feel bad about it.
These are the hazards of the industry.
I've been writing.
John's doing just fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of John, that's he programmed the third game that Audacity Games has for sale, and that's the Alien Abduction. Do you guys have anything to say about that one?
Well, I went to college with John.
Yeah.
So I've known him for years and years and years. And Dan and I both reached out to him and just to see what he was doing. I mean, he's not the only one. We've reached out to other name designers in the industry. I don't know if we'll talk about those or not. But the idea of people writing 6502 code sends some people out of the room screaming. But John was retired and bored. And he said, "You guys are really doing this?" And we said, "Yeah." And he wanted to do a kind of spiritual successor to Hero. And that's what brought us Alien Abduction. And we think it's a great game. Right, Dan?
Yeah.
Everybody's wanted a Hero sequel for years. Here we got it now.
Yep.
Audacity Games, yes.
And I'm sure John will do another game for us.
Oh, that would be great. There you go. There's Alien Abduction right there.
There's no green.
So,
Yeah.
coming up for Audacity, there's one game that we definitely know about, and we probably talk about that one first, and then if there's anything you could kind of hint towards, we could talk about that. But and some people in the chat have been mentioning it. I'm going to see if I can try to find it.
Which means they've actually read
here we go
too. So
any hints about Poseidon's Gate?
Well, you have to understand that we are such sticklers for secrecy that we were able to do this entire thing, including getting injection molded plastic done and finding printers to do boxes and labels and cartridges and manuals. And not a person in the industry got a whiff of what we were doing. So it is our policy that we don't talk about product release dates.
Okay.
At least.
Okay.
Largely because the last thing we would want is to have this turn into a deadline.
Right.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
We have developed games
no
on
deadlines.
deadlines for 45 years. And we've decided we're not going to let the deadline push us around anymore.
I mean, you don't want 90-day deadlines anymore.
No, we don't.
But is there anything you can tell us about Poseidon's Gate? Even if it's 3 years from now, totally fine. But
Well, I think we-
and
I
it's
think
funny
we
because we
showed-
were talking in the green room. We were talking in the green room, and you said you guys very sneakily put this at the end of the manual, and that's why very few people seem to know about it.
Yeah, I think we included the box cover, which tells you that the game is pretty far along, because we have to do all of that creative. Everything has to be done,
Yeah.
the boxes and the manuals and all that, and that's well underway. And you can infer from the box cover that it is an underwater adventure.
With Poseidon, with the name Poseidon, I thought it'd be a skydiving game.
Oh yeah.
Sarcasm.
Well, the description is in the back of the manual as well. The page that covers Poseidon does describe a little bit
Yeah.
about what you're doing.
So that's a lot about the game. I wouldn't want to say anything else, because I may have features that I put in the game that I don't like. And, every once in a while in a 45-year career, I have developed a game start to finish and is completed. And I play it and I said, this isn't good enough, and put it on the shelf. I will literally abandon an entire project if it's not good enough when it's done. And Garry has this philosophy that he's learned when developing a game, and how you know it's fun. What we have to do is iteratively, 15 times a day, you write a piece of code, and then you upload it into the machine, and then you grab the joystick and you play it, right? This is how we have to do this. You move the joystick to the right and the guy runs to the left, that's a bug. So you go in and you change the code so that it works correctly. That happens 1,000 times, 2,000 times, 10,000 times during a development project. And Garry has identified the fact that that day that you upload it to the game system and you pick up the joystick and you test the thing you just put in and you see it works, and you find yourself still playing the game, even though you've already done the play testing that you needed to do for that bug that you fixed, then you know something's there. If it forces you to want to keep playing, even as you're developing it, then we know it's there. And like I said, there are times entire games never reached that point for me, and I just abandoned them completely. I wish I'd saved the source code, I suppose, just for posterity, but the video game business has never been very good at saving their history.
Yes.
Thankfully, the National Video Game Museum, those guys actually went to Atari and Activision and dumpster dove outside just to try to find some of the stuff that was being thrown away. And, we're getting a little better at it in the video game business in general. But
Hey, I just want to say something on the comments. When we were talking about the ARM chips,
Yep.
we have no problem with people using them, and we are huge fans of John Champo, who is on the list right here.
Yeah.
As
John
one of
does
the
great
comments.
stuff.
We are great fans of John Champo. We love his games, and
John.
John's good to see you here. And everybody has their own way of doing it. John does great games. We don't, there's no ill will about use an ARM or don't use an ARM.
no, although
Yes, and he clearly feels the same about you guys.
we've tried to talk John into doing some work for us, and he said, "Without the ARM chip, are you nuts?"
That's true. I mean,
It's true.
He's got his own thing going. He cranks out at least 2 a year.
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
much by himself. So
Yep.
yeah, but
Now-
he is using the ARM chip, but still.
I have a
Really
feeling
bad.
I know the answer to this, but I would be remiss not to ask, and it was asked in your comments again. You hinted at some names that you were asking if they would want to make a game for Audacity Games. Anybody you want to name drop? Like I said, I have a feeling no, but
Well, no, we're not going to mention names, but the kind of responses we got is, one guy said, "My wife told me never to go backwards in your career."
Right.
Okay, so it's just a philosophy.
yeah.
Another guy has said, "I'd love to design the game, but I don't want to program in assembly language anymore." And another person said, "But that was so hard," and it was. Right now you can both pull up Unity and make a game in an afternoon, in a weekend. Doing this stuff is really hard, but it is rewarding.
But we're not
It's like
giving up.
building a log cabin.
We're not
We
giving
will
up.
go back
No, they-
and speak to them again. We will talk to them
There
again.
you go.
Well, one thing I like to ask and mention is just, and again, I know you guys' policy, so it's perfectly fine. But I guess as a request from little old me is, I would love if you guys could make a new game for the 2600 that uses the paddles. Like I love paddle games, and like you do not know how many hours of my life I've wasted on Kaboom, and I would really like to have something new that I could play with paddles.
Well, on that subject, let me clarify something. You know, it is often listed, Kaboom is often listed in my softwareology, and I am credited on Kaboom, but Larry Kaplan created Kaboom.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big fan of Atari's Avalanche arcade game,
Yeah.
which you would have to have played it back then because it certainly isn't around anymore. And it was rocks dropping from the ceiling, and you would catch with paddles, just like a paddle game. And it was a paddle controller game. And he created that game for Activision. And it played really well, but it didn't look like an Activision game. So I was asked to go in, and I created the Mad Bomber, and I created the bombs with the fuses and the sound effects, and turned the paddles into buckets of water. And it was his gameplay, and all I did was spruce it up with art.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to make sure that those of you who love Kaboom, because it is the best Twitch game ever made, Larry Kaplan is 100% responsible for that gameplay. All I did was make it pretty.
Well, it does look good, and it does play good. So you guys made a good team on that. So
Yeah, I remember loving it when I bought it. I couldn't believe how good it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
It's
but to answer your
incredibly
question,
addictive.
how many people have paddles? How many people of the subset who still have their Atari 2600s working? What is the percentage of people who have paddles?
probably
And the
not
three
as
of you don't count.
The three of us don't count, but I will say to Atari's credit,
Yeah.
they make new paddles now, and they feel very good. So there are new paddles that you can get. But you're right,
work
and,
with
and
the old
that's a lot
hardware.
of people. A lot of people like, why did only one game use the driver controller? Why weren't there more paddle games? Because you needed different controllers than just the standard thing that everybody had. And that is automatically going to reduce the amount of games you could potentially sell.
Right.
So I did want to mention, sorry, go ahead.
Can I just do one more shout out? I just
Absolutely.
want to do one more shout out before I forget. We work closely with Atari. So, you know, in the day with Activision, there was competition and people saying, oh, Atari games aren't good or whatever. No, we have great respect for Atari. We have great respect for Wade Rosen. He's doing a good job getting that, getting them back into the game business, where essentially for years, God knows what they were doing. But since he's taken the helm, and it's funny, we decided to do 2600 games. And then after, a year later, was when they released the 2600 Plus. If anybody thinks we decided to re-enter the market to support the machine, it's actually, we did it ahead of time. But we're thrilled with the 2600 Plus, the 7800 Plus. We are thrilled with what they're doing, and we partner with them whenever we have a chance.
So a buddy of ours who's a good friend of the channel, this is off topic. His name is, he's known as the Intellivision Gamer, and he has his own channel, but he just saw a couple of you guys at one of the game cons here, I think over the weekend maybe. And he said, his name is Casey. And he said, Dan named the game after him.
Yes.
I just want to point that out.
I do remember Casey. Yeah,
I did not know that, but it may be true. I just don't remember that.
It was so long ago.
I did.
Go ahead.
I did want to say that I would be remiss, because last year on my birthday, I played Atari games with all my kids as a video on here on YouTube. And my youngest at the time, an 8-year-old girl, when I told her that I was going to be talking with you guys, she wanted specifically to mention, because this was the game I played with her, that she loves Freeway. So little kids, even now, still liking the old Atari games. And I introduced all my kids to Atari very, very young, like 4 years old. So they have their own little nostalgia for it before they moved on to their PlayStations and their Xboxes. But there was one question that was in, and I'm going to actually combine a couple of questions. Do you guys, now obviously you guys have worked on many different systems in your careers, but you're most famous for the Atari 2600 and especially the Activision stuff. Is there any interest in programming games for other systems, like maybe the 7800 or the Intellivision or something like that through Audacity? Or is it, do you think, just a 2600 outlet for you guys?
Well, nothing is off the table. The charter of Audacity Games is to make games for retro consoles. Nintendo is very protective of the NES. We would have to license with the NES. Same with our favorite console, Gary and I, at least, our favorite was the Super Nintendo. So there are a lot of issues that we have to deal with, logistics, before we go on to do that. So we're pretty much into the Atari 2600 for a while, I think.
That's fair.
Well, fair. I mean, one caveat is I would love to see the 7800 plus sell like crazy, because if it does, I for one wouldn't mind publishing a 7800 game.
Absolutely.
That'd be really
I'm first in line for that. Awesome. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about while you're here? I mean, like I said, we first of all, how can people get your games? Tell us what they get, the different options that they have, and what games they are, and how they can get them.
Sure. I mean,
Go ahead,
of the other things that came in that 3 years of development of Circus Convoy is the Audacity Games web portal. Now, if you go to audacitygames.com, you can learn about our games, you can purchase our games, and if you purchase our games through the web portal, they're pre-registered to you because you create an account before you go in. And sadly, a lot of people fight back on this, but we're currently PayPal only. But we're looking at that for the next year. But anyway, it also lets you, because they're registered to you, there's a manage page that lets you see which games you own. And so it's like you can have your own collection showing up in this web portal. And from there, you can download the digital copy of your collector edition that comes from there. And you can transfer it to a friend. If they also have an account, there's a procedure for transferring the game. So it's a web portal, and it's very, it's got all the capability. It's got everything we need to, you need to collect your games. But specifically, every Audacity game has a serial number. And that serial number is registered to you. So if somebody even gets a hold of your ROM image or whatever, they can't use that game. They can't submit scores. There are things they can't do unless they have your account information. So it's a way to protect against piracy and, just a ROM image flooding the market. So that's just one thing. Every one of them, all three tiers. We talked about briefly, we had the standard edition for $60 is the ROM cartridge, the label, full color box, manual. And it's basically the physical game that you would play in your Atari 2600. We do a collector edition, which is $99, and it's basically two games in one. It has everything that the standard edition has, plus a hologram serial number on the box, which matches the hologram serial number on the certificate of authenticity that comes with your collector edition. You're a collector, you understand why you want that, right? And then the digital copy that everybody wants to be able to play the emulator when they don't feel like plugging in their Atari. So that's it's a good value if you want to have the game to play on the Atari, but you also want to be able to play it on an emulator. Interestingly enough, when you submit scores, it knows the difference between whether you played on the original hardware or whether you played on an emulator. And so you're going to find some people who say, my score might be lower than yours, but mine is on the hardware and not on an emulator where you could cheat. And so my score is better than yours.
Yeah, Stella, you can change speeds and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it does keep track of that for those people who want to, want to brag. On the subject of what every game does, every game has an elapsed time. So one of the things that happened over the last 45 years that we never thought of at the Atari days is speedrunning. So you can actually now keep track of the exact amount of time it takes for you to get from start to finish. And that shows, and that's actually recorded on your high score. So it's not just your score, but it's also the time at which you took to complete it. So there's bragging rights for speedrunning. So that's kind of our product line. But then we said, well, wait a minute, what about those insane collectors? You know who you are. You're the guy who has to have everything that nobody else has. So we created the VIP Collector Edition, and it's very limited. For Circus Convoy, there were only 100. We ran out of those so fast. We've done 150 for Alien and Casey. And there are tchotchkes that are one run. There's 150 of them. They'll never be made again. And you can have those as part of your collector edition. So, for example, with Alien Abduction, VIP, thank you. Well, it is the VIP Collector Edition.
Oh, nice.
Well, Gary, there are no more of those available.
This came in the Circus Convoy. Alien Abduction.
Buy them in the aftermarket.
haven't seen one yet. Alien Abduction comes with a full-size poster that's the equivalent, the same poster that's Impact with the collector edition, but it's a beautiful thing all by itself. It's
not folded up.
It's like the marquee posters outside a movie theater in the 50s for a science fiction movie. And it's all Gary's creation, and it's beautiful. Full-size poster comes with the VIP. The hat, Gary's wearing the Casey hat, but not the alien hat.
Every game has a hat.
Put on your alien hat.
I don't know where it is.
Don't know where it is.
Been abducted.
I knew where this was.
And also a little alien figurine, right out of the game, basically. Casey, the VIP, has a hat and a beautiful pocket watch, conductor's pocket watch with a chain and pop open. I don't know what material it is.
And a logo.
It's not. That's right. It's engraved for the game, and it's not gold. It's probably not brass, but it's shiny metal. It's not toy. It's not plastic. And a miniature Casey's Gold cartridge as a keychain.
Yep.
And again, these are unique tchotchkes. We only make a fixed number of them. And for you, the collector who has to have the thing that nobody else has, you got to get yourself the VIP Collector Edition.
Yes, we know a few of those people.
Yes.
We know one who's probably bought 4 of them. So
Yeah, you met him. So
yeah, you probably saw him this weekend. Well, I have enjoyed this show.
I actually have. You know what? Here's another, and I know.
Oh, okay.
When this question popped up, I think this is actually a good topic, and maybe we just really lightly talk about it. Obviously, the homebrew scene, there's a lot of hacks, there's a lot of ports of classic games, and you guys, as authors of some of these classic games, have had ports of your games made or hacks of your games made. What do you guys think of that?
Well, speaking for myself, I love it. Fine. You want to take my ROM and make some changes, change the graphics? Great. It's no skin off of my back. You know,
Mm.
make something cool. That's great. I imagine the other guys feel the same way.
Yeah.
Well, I recently a version of Keystone Capers was done. What was it done on, Dan? What platform?
RT, it was a
Upload?
7800.
7800.
7800.
Keystone Coppers, yeah.
And my only comment was, and I commented this on Facebook, I said, if they're going to copy my game exactly, they should at least give me credit for the design. You
Which
know?
they do. Yeah, I did a review of that game.
On mine. Yeah.
And I in the credits of the game, you are mentioned there as the original designer of the game.
Okay. Yeah, I'd rather see it on the front of the box. Big bold letters.
Yes.
It's
Garry
not that way,
Kitchen's Keystone
Yeah.
Capers is now Keystone
Right.
Coppers on the 7800.
Right.
I've always been like so my channel, I review primarily I review homebrew games. That is my primary thing. I do many reviews of original 2600 games and stuff like that, but the main thing on my channel is reviewing homebrew games. And I did review that one. But a big thing for me is ports are a huge part of the homebrew community, and I enjoy these ports. They're well done, absolutely. But you had made a comment on Facebook about original games. And I've always kind of leaned to that as well. I think I think homebrew is the future of a lot of these systems. And I love, I'm happy to play ports. I like ports, but I get excited about new games.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been my position of it.
And
then,
I think I remember that comment. I think I remember the comment I made. And I guess where I draw the line is if you're going to do an exact copy of one of our games, it's a great way to learn, because if you don't know how to make an original game.
Absolutely.
But give it away for free. Don't monetize an exact copy of someone else's intellectual property. That just doesn't sit well. That's just me.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you.
I respect that.
Right.
And then
if they are going to monetize, share some of the wealth, right?
Let me.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
It's not about me getting money. It's just it's kind of just protecting the integrity of intellectual property. That's all.
I got you. Okay.
To change the subject, I saw somebody's comment come up. No, we do not have an electrician in the family.
Oh yeah, that was a lighthearted question I was going to go to.
There were just 3 of us. I don't know if my mother wanted any girls. But I did want to just circle back before we finish on a couple of things I've noticed from watching people play Casey's Gold. And I know that no one reads the manual, and I thought I would mention a few things here to help those who do not read the manual. That jumping on those plungers on the trains will open hatches of the exact color. So a yellow plunger will somewhere on the train open a hatch that's yellow for you to go into the cars. You can move the barrels in the town level by jumping near the barrel, keeping the fire button pressed, and running into the barrel. You'll push it right or left, and that'll help move the barrel to where you need it. And I did notice some people struggled with the broken ladders in the mine levels and the town levels, where you just simply jump and push up, and you'll grab that ladder and be able to go up and down. I did see a few people getting stuck in some of the YouTube videos I watched, and I know nobody reads the manuals, so I just wanted to see if I could help a little bit. There are cameos in the game later on in some of the later levels of some of the most famous Activision characters, and you'll see them riding the rails with Casey in the dining cars and the coach cars. And there's a lot of exciting stuff. I was happy to see somebody played it and said, wow, I've been playing for an hour. There's new things in it. Well, I mean, we pushed it to the limit. So in the game itself, if you play quite near the middle to end of the game, you'll start to see brand new cars you've never seen before. There's museum cars where I replicate ancient Egypt and some of the puzzles Indiana Jones had to do. There's There's puzzle cars. There's cars where you go back to the dinosaur era, and it kind of mimics what David may have done in Pitfall in certain instances. So there's some really cool things to the middle to end of the game. So I didn't want people to think, well, after playing it for maybe an hour, they've seen everything. Some of the reason why the game took so long was, as Garry mentioned earlier, that, kept pushing to say we need the bar higher and higher and higher. And fortunately, that really helped us create what I hope is a really deep experience.
I can't wait to dive into it. I really can't. It's going to be great. I haven't even registered my copy yet, but like I said, I started playing the first level and I got all the way to where I think it's the black ladder. And I'm like, how do I get that black ladder to come up? So I'll figure, don't tell me. I'm going to figure
I won't.
I know how.
Okay. I know how. Okay. Well, guys.
You're excited to dive into it. That's the next game.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Poseidon's Gate.
That's very
Okay.
fun.
All right. That's right. There's water involved with that one. So I am so thrilled that you guys agreed and came on the show. We met at Korg's earlier in the year, and we talked about it then, and you guys were so gracious to agree to do it. And I think it's great timing. I think this was great timing because of Casey's Gold coming out and the news of Poseidon's Gate coming out. So I think it's really good. So I appreciate you guys being here. I do want to let the audience know next week is Christmas Eve, next Tuesday, and then the week after that is New Year's Eve. So we've decided that we're not going to have podcasts on those evenings, all right? But on the 7th of January, we will be back. Us guys did chat in Discord about this, and I think I'd like to do it, is we might do an episode talking about some of our favorite games that we got for Christmas and our Christmas experience with video games. And these guys are as much a part of that for me as anybody that I know.
I was going to say, I already showed 3 of mine. So.
And we're still getting the chills for what we can get for Christmas. So, all right, guys.
I do want to. Atari boy here wants me to say hello to you. Apparently, he's done your box art. He did the art for the hats, and
Yes.
Yeah,
I
John
just
has
like
done
that.
a
So he
great
wanted
job.
to say
Yeah.
hi.
John,
Thank you,
good man.
John. We love your work.
All right.
Yes,
Well,
thank you very much, guys.
Yep.
Take care now.
So with that, you guys be sure to stay on, but we're gonna head out. Thank you so much for everybody watching. This has been one of my favorite episodes ever, just because I can reminisce a little bit. So we'll see you
Thank you,
next
Paul.
time on Retro Bliss Rewind. Take care.
See ya.